Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you today for taking time to join us for the webinar, Beyond Borders, Building Culture and Trust with Remote Talent. Very excited for today to be speaking with Laura, who has been kind enough to share some time and share a little bit about how she has worked with remote talent. So I'm going to start with just a quick intro of Laura, and then we'll jump right into the session. So Laura Yost is the Vice President of Operations at Knippenberg Insurance, bringing over 26 years of experience in the insurance industry. Licensed in property, casualty, life, and health insurance, Laura has played a key role in the agency's long-standing success and growth. She leads a dynamic team of more than 25 professionals, fostering a culture of excellence, accountability, and client-first service. Under her leadership, Knippenberg Insurance has earned numerous industry accolades, including the AllStar Presidents, Champions, and Top in Life Sales Awards. Very, very cool. Laura is passionate about helping individuals and families protect what matters most. Outside of work, she enjoys traveling, running, and spending time with her two children, Chloe and Tucker, and their four beloved dogs. So welcome, Laura, today. How's everything going?
Everything's going great. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to offer whatever knowledge I can to help everybody else along with their remote employees.
Yes, yes, very excited. I think it's something where even if you have a sense of how to do it, it's always helpful to hear from others on best practices and tips and tricks that really have really worked well. So I'm very much looking forward to today's session. Just to kind of kick things off, can you talk a little bit about how your team first got started working with remote talent in the first place? Just talk a little bit about what sort of led you to pursue it, or the drivers, et cetera. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, we were going through the normal hiring process, which everybody knows is quite a stressful situation and a hard situation. We were, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, went in the midst of the COVID era as well, where remote employees were becoming more popular. It was harder to hire people to, be in the office and train them and whatnot. And we were an exclusive nationwide agent for years, and an ex agent had got us on to Edge, and that's when we really started our journey with the remote employees. We had dabbled and looked into virtual assistants previously, but what we didn't like about that route was that they weren't dedicated to our agency. They'd answer the phone for my agency, this call, the next call would be for Bob's agency. We wanted somebody that was dedicated to our customers completely 100% and would get to know them. So that's what led us to the Edge relationship, because that's how things work with you guys. We started the interview process, which every process, not to Edge is a great company to work with. I really, really love it. Every process that you guys have, you've put so much thought into those processes. The hiring process was very easy. Looking at the applications, I mean, these people were very well vetted by Edge. And it just made it so easy to do the interview. We actually ended up hiring two right off the bat, two remote employees from Edge immediately our first time, and we really had no idea what we were doing with them initially. So it was a little bit overwhelming, but the training process that you guys had for them, now here we are, 4 years later, we've got three of them that have been with us for about 4 years, and the other they've been with us for 2 years, and some of our other producers have even hired their own Edge remote employees. So overall, with the Knippenberg agency, we have 5 total remote employees from Edge.
That's terrific. The fact that I think you've had such long-standing relationships with the Edge talent, I think says something. I think retention is always a concern for any business, and so the fact that you've had some Edge talent work with you for so long is wonderful to hear. Uh, so you mentioned you made a comment. When you first started, you weren't exactly sure how it would go and sort of what exactly how it would play out. Talk a little bit more about any kind of reservations and hesitations initially. I think whenever you're doing anything new, you obviously hope for the best, but a little bit of uncertainty and concern. You share a little bit more about kind of what went through your minds as you were getting started working with remote talent.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the reservation was just how do we train and keep track of their activity? Like, how do we do that remotely? And that was the scariest part, was just figuring out how to track their activity. And, we have it down pat today, of course. And I think that also is part of what leads to, like you said, the retention and us having the same, the ambassadors, what we call them. We have the same ambassadors today that we've had for years. But those reservations in the beginning went away very quickly once we figured out our processes for training and tracking. And of course, they come very well trained from your EDGE program before they start with the agency, and they have all the knowledge, but they don't have exactly our line of work and process, how we deal with each incident, each customer, each issue, each activity that we have to do. So you do have to put in that one-on-one training with them when they first come on board. They spend a certain amount of time with a specific staff to get that additional training on how the Knippenberg agency works, and everybody has to do that with their own agency processes.
That's great. And this training, was it something that sort of evolved organically, or did you have any kind of tough lessons you had to learn along the way that, this works well, this doesn't work as well? Like how did you go about sort of formulating the training program?
We really used the training program that we had for in-house employees. We just did it online. We used the Teams, the webinars, the face-to-face with the cameras. With our phone system, we used the shadowing feature. So for the first couple weeks, I forget exactly how many weeks of training they get from Edge before they come on board with us. But once they came on board with us at that point, then they literally were on phone calls shadowing one of our current producers every day for probably 2 weeks. I think they listened in and did nothing else other than listen to the way that we talked, the way that we interacted, the way that we talked to the carriers and the reps and stuff like that. And I think that's really super important to put that additional time in, because I think maybe some of the assumptions that agents have, or that like your clients have, like us, whenever we hire the remote employee, is that they're going to come and know exactly everything right away. They don't. Even though you have that excellent training program, again, it's super important to teach them the ways that you're doing business. And it takes time. It takes more than a day for them to catch on. And again, I think that leads back to the retention as well. I've talked to so many other agents on our side of things that are like, well, I had somebody for a week, it just didn't work out. A week is not long enough to decide whether it's going to work out. So I would encourage everybody to really take the time and put the energy and effort in to training them, just like you would an in-house person. It can't be a quick, fast, easy, oh, they're off and running, I don't have to talk to them anymore. You have to keep that communication really, really close for the first couple weeks, and even after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think when it comes to, I'd imagine folks listening to this webinar right now, they think about remote talent, and in their minds, it's maybe not that different than someone on site that you would try to onboard. And you even mentioned you followed a similar process to what you would do. It's just you applied it online. Were there anything else? Was there anything else in terms of trying to do something specifically for the remote talent because they weren't physically in your office? Did you have to modify anything or change up any kind of processes specifically because of the remote nature of the work?
We did, and we developed a few more like Excel spreadsheet tracking documents for them, just based
Okay.
on the daily activities that we were giving them. Because most of our in-house people, of course, can really do all the tasks, where some of the remote people, but not being licensed, that limits some of their capabilities. We have never found that a roadblock or found that to hinder their success or their activity or anything that they've done for us. I would love if we could get them appointed, because they would do even better. You know what I mean? With all of their energy and their commitment and dedication to our agency, that would be fantastic. But yes, we did have to modify some of the daily tracking the way that we did with them, because they were more specific to certain roles whenever we were doling out their activities.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. And I think a lot of it is, like you've been touching on, is putting in the effort to account for the fact that folks are not physically in the office. I think sometimes perhaps people take it for granted. Oh, I could just tap them on the shoulder, right, and tell them something. So kind of making a concerted effort to work a little more closely and to stay a little bit better engaged, I think goes a long way. So this session, we want to definitely dive a little bit more into culture and trust. I think with remote talent, the setup is oftentimes they're entering into perhaps where Knippenberg or any other business, they are kind of perceived as a little bit of an outsider. I don't know if that's the best term, but just they are separate from everyone in an office. Did you pick up on any of that? And if so, how did you try to address that? This idea of as a culture, work culture, we're all one team. It's just that we've got folks not necessarily physically in the space. How did you handle that if that was something that came up?
Yeah, we were nervous about that. That was one of our other reservations from the very beginning is how do we make these team members feel like true team members? Make them feel like they're part of the gang, so to speak, because that's how kind of agents that have the longevity that most of our employees have, that we're a big family. And we wanted them, just like any new person I would hire in-house, I tell them, you've got to get along with everybody, you've got to fit in. We're a big team, we're together more than we're with our regular our families at home, we're with our team, our work family more. So we did have those reservations, and we had a really good plan from the very beginning to prevent that. And it was basically to treat them exactly like any other new hire. We talked to them about their families, their hobbies, their interests. We told them about our hobbies, families, interests. We went around, the first couple of days, we had one-on-one team calls with them, with all of our staff. Every single person got to have, 5-10 minutes to just really kind of, I know it's not a lot of time to get to know somebody, but it's like an icebreaker, so to speak. So then the next time they talk to them, they could laugh or joke about, hey, did you finish that book that you were reading, or did you finish that painting that you were painting? So I think that is really part for us, that what made them feel. And I was always super nervous, and I still check in again, even 4 years later, with the couple that have been with us for that long. I always check in, and I'm like, are we communicating with you enough? Are we sharing with you enough? Are you sharing with us enough? What's going on in your life? Those kind of things, because that's what we do with our in-house employees. I mean, like I said, we're a family, and I think most agencies operate like that because you work so closely together. You have to know each other. And that's the worry
Yeah.
with the remote employee, is that you're not getting to know them outside of them, adding a vehicle or doing a mortgage change. You have to have that bond outside of that.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the fact that you are making that proactive effort to have specific activities and specific events taking place to allow for that bonding and connection to happen, even if folks aren't physically in the same space, I imagine goes a long way because ultimately, uh, it's. I think about when a lot of companies went into sort of a remote setup, you lost a little bit of that connection when you can't go to out to lunch together or share coffee together. So I think again, making the effort and having those specific activities where they're introducing each other and sharing a little bit more about themselves outside of the work profile, if you will, it must be terrific.
Yeah.
So when you're doing these things, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead. I
Oh,
cut
no,
you
I
off
was just
there.
saying, absolutely. It's very important to keep that in mind, that you've got to keep that connection even when they're outside of the office.
Right, right. When you think back to kind of first getting started with Edge and this idea around trust, how did the broader team take to it? It's one thing if you're in a position you're in, you're saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to be doing," and you're sort of leading the efforts to implement and incorporate. That makes sense, and I think folks will probably say, "Yeah, okay, we'll do that." But for the people who actually working day to day, with the remote talent, let's say, or just not necessarily in a position to drive the initiative. How did they receive it? How did you address the trust issues around? I now work with someone I don't even know. I've never met before. Like, how did you try to handle that?
Yeah, yeah, and that is a concern that I had with my current team. Now, the current team at the time, before the remote employees came on, I mean, they were wonderful. We've all worked together for a very long time. So we sat down before and we talked about, what are your concerns? What are your worries? What do you think might possibly be a roadblock? So we could work that out with them ahead of time. Most of them, thankfully, were gracious. They were on board to have that additional support coming on, the new team members coming on. They wanted to train. I had a few of my fast and furious producers that were, solely writing business, that were a little hesitant to give like side work to the remote employees, because they were like, well, how do I know it's going to get done? I'm like, well, you have to follow up with them. It's our responsibility. If we hand any employee a piece of work, you have to follow through and make sure that that everything's being taken care of right. Now, after you follow up hardcore for a first couple times, then you can kind of relax a little bit, because you're getting to know them through that first process of, I don't want to say micromanaging them, but initially in the beginning, don't we have to micromanage all new employees? I mean, that is a part of the
Right.
process, unfortunately, until you get to know their habits, their behaviors, and how they're going to form them. I did have a few producers that I had to kind of coax along, and I had to have conversations with, even, a couple months after the remote employees came on board and we started reassigning duties. And I, tell this one producer, you've got to start using the remote employee to button up your documents, your DocuSign, make sure everything's filed in the management system. And they were like, "Oh, I'm going to keep doing it myself." I'm like, "No, let's have a phone call." So I'd have a phone call with the three of them, or the two of them, including myself, and just make sure the introduction was there, that any concerns either one of them had, we talked out. We're a very open agency. We always have been, and I think that helps in things. If anybody's, I have an open door policy, and that actually, I kind of pre-interviewed all of my remote employees before this call, as you know, and got some feedback from them on what they think we do well to make them feel accepted. And a lot of that was, we're very honest. We have the open door policy. Anytime they have any issues, concerns, reservations about any process or any new process or any team member, we all talk about it together. And I think that openness and that honesty and the open door policy, helps with that, so that everybody does feel like they can trust each other.
That's terrific. I love the open door policy and really saying, there's no difference between someone who works remotely, someone on site. We want to be as transparent as possible. I think that is a recipe for success and tends to work really, really well. So that's really great to hear that that's the case. And as you were talking about the open door policy, it made me think about just kind of communication in general. I think you've touched on this already a little bit, how you went out of your way to make sure there's active communication. Are we doing enough? Are there questions that we can help you with? Are you needing other things, et cetera? Talk a little bit about how that kind of came about. Perhaps it was always the way Knippenberg did things and it was just natural to kind of go into it. Or, how did you kind of frame expectations around, hey, this is how we're going to handle things like responsiveness, providing feedback if necessary, that type of thing. How did the communication hygiene effectively come about?
Yeah, definitely. I'm super excited about this question, just because in all of my remote employees that I talked to, a couple of things resonated between their comments, and we didn't do this together. We did this individually, so they weren't hearing each other and just kind of, mocking or mimicking each other. They all had their own comments, and one of the things is we offer them consistent communication, and we're always there to answer when they need help. So, and we've always, like you said, we've always been that way. We actually went kind of probably heavy handed when the remote employees started, just because we were so worried we weren't going to do enough with them. They probably were annoyed by us initially, saying like, "Oh my goodness." But we have a morning meeting every morning. It's via Teams, because we have other remote employees now from COVID that were in-house employees originally, and they just decided we were good with them staying at home. So we do a Teams meeting 8:30 in the morning. I know everybody's saying like, "Oh, how do you have time to do that?" That's the first reaction from everybody. It can be a 5-minute meeting or it can be a 15-minute meeting. We all get on the call, including the remote employees. Everybody says good morning. Everybody's got their coffee, jokes for a minute. Then we get started. They talk about their previous day's activities, how many calls they had in, how many out, how many certificates they did, how many payments they took, all of their activity. They share very rapid fire. So it doesn't have to take up a lot of time. But they all said that they love that. They love that feature with our agency, is that we are literally talking to each other every single day. Now there's vacations, there's sick time, there's times that I'm not on the call, but the call always happens whether I'm there or not, because I have 2 or 3 people behind me that will jump in and lead the call if need be. So there's always that daily touch from that meeting. So that's a lot of communication, and that's what they talked about heavily in their comments when they sent me what they feel we do to keep them connected. So I think that's a huge part of it. And then we also do, with our activity trackers, we have Excel spreadsheets they keep. They're real time, so I can see them. And then just in case if they miss a morning meeting, I can then go in and see how many calls they did have, because I didn't get to talk to them about it. And then on a monthly basis, I send an activity summary email across the whole entire agency saying how many calls everybody had, how many sales they had, how much premium they had. And I include the remote employees, even though they're not writing business, they're still answering phone calls and they're doing activity. And they're also extremely supportive of their team members. So when they see that somebody did a really good job of sales, they'll get an email from that remote employee saying, "Hey, I saw your numbers. They're rocking. That's so cool." So again, that's pulling them in part of the team, even though that's not their job. They still are involved in that.
That's really great. I think when it comes to working with remote talent, remote employees, and you mentioned that at Knippenberg, you have other folks not related to Edge also in a remote capacity. But I think in general, this idea of incorporating them into not being viewed as just a distant resource that sits wherever and does work, but actually part of the team. I love the part where they're shouting out good work that's being done and kind of celebrating together. That's wonderful. I think that only strengthens, I imagine, the team as a whole, because now it's not just the people in the office and others outside, but it's one team, regardless of where folks are located. So that's terrific. Um, when it comes to this idea of trying to build rituals that you mentioned, the daily stand-ups, which is terrific, and those types of things. Curious if there are any specific tools that kind of help with this as well. I mean, I think things like Zoom, like we're on right now, and others probably play a part. But any other tools that you've seen useful when it comes to working with remote folks? Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything off the wall. I mean, the email, the Teams chat, and within the Teams, not just the meetings, but like the chat where we can talk to each other. The office, I'm not in it because it drives me nuts personally when I get those little alerts all the time. I'll do one chats with people to check in, but they have their own little personal group. And again, with me not being in there, that's what I talked to two of the trainers too that worked with the remote people early on, and they're like, we actually like that you're not in that group because everybody's like a little bit lighter, just so they'll joke a little bit like, and they use the Teams chat, so it's got all the service people, all the sales people in there, and if a call comes in and somebody's on the phone, they'll just chat like, hey, this call is waiting for you or whatever like that, and then somebody will be like, oh, that's that customer I talk, and they're always kind of chit chatting together. So we do, even though everybody has Teams, they might not be using their Teams chat in that manner. I would suggest that just having, even if it's like your office manager or somebody that is help training them, make a little chat group with the couple people in there that they can just chit chat back and forth all day. And they'll say, hey, I'm going to lunch, and they'll be like, hey, don't spill ketchup on yourself, and just kind of joke with each other through Teams. And then we also use our phone system as Vonage, but it's just like any other VoIP system. So we use that obviously to communicate with each other and to talk to each other about situations and stuff like that. And then like I said, I don't think anything out of the ordinary over regular technology that we found to help, but we just really take advantage of
Yeah.
what we have in front of us and what Edge, provides those remote employees with.
Yeah, yeah. I think even things like group chat, it's one of those things, like any tool, it's only as useful as the utilization of it. If you have a tool and no one uses it, it's basically like it doesn't exist. So it's great to hear that it sounds like folks they have the tools in front of them, but they're actually engaging it. They're using it to communicate. They're using it to collaborate. I think that plays a big part in trying to work more effectively with remote folks. Uh, a couple other questions on this. With regards to going back to communication, and talked a little bit about trust, and I mentioned feedback and things like that. So I don't know if you had any specific situations where you had to provide feedback with remote employees and that type of thing, but just talk a little bit about how to best handle that, right? So you have a situation where maybe someone needs, it could be both positive and less positive feedback, but something where feedback you want to provide. Any sort of experiences or best practices for how to best do that with a remote employee?
Yeah, I thought about this question because I figured that it would come up. And two points on this. I do have one specific example with one remote employee, but
Okay.
then in general, I would say some of the ways that we've kind of head off any issues like that we've really had to dig into and address is just like I said before, you can't expect that any new employee is going to know everything right off the bat. So if they're not following a process, explain to them and then retrain. There's no need to get upset, or there's no need to not mention it to them and then fire them a week later. It's just, that's insane. So mention it to them, explain it to them, and then retrain them on that topic. And that will keep down, again, the lack of trust and whatnot, because if you're not really being clear and communicating with them, that causes problems. The one specific example that I thought of, one of our Edge employees, I send emails daily because I get all the emails from mortgage companies, whatnot, to do changes. And I don't have time to go in and look at their notes to see that something was done. So I expect somebody to reply, taken care of, done, noted, whatever. Not a big explanation. I don't need a novel. She stopped doing that. So she wasn't letting me know that she took care of stuff. She was taking care of it, but she wasn't letting me know quick and fast. And I didn't have time to read the notes. So I had to approach her, and I actually had her trainer, because she had a really good relationship with him. I had him reach out. I said, what's going on? Is something wrong? She's not like this. It's been like this for about 3 weeks. I let it go, but we really need to clear it up now. So he spoke to her in here to find out she was having some issues. She was having some personal stuff going on. She was making sure she was getting all of her work done, but she was just kind of getting tripped up on that last piece of follow-up because she was moving through things so quickly, just trying to like take care of all of the stuff at once. So he had that conversation with her, and then he encouraged her to come to me again, reminding her of that open door policy. Come to find out, she was a little afraid of that. She didn't know what that meant. She thought maybe I was going to be mad at her or reprimand her. But after her relationship with him was so well bonded and he explained, no, my gosh, I've worked with her for 14 years. You can go to her about anything, just, let her know. Then she did come to me and we talked. So again, just keeping it the open lines of communication, making sure that you're sharing. I shouldn't have waited the couple weeks because I got a little more frustrated. I should have gone right away and listened to my own advice to explain and then retrain her. I failed to do that. That's on me. But that's just an example that I thought of, a time that I had to go back and kind of fix a problem before it got bigger.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is, I think folks get busy, and obviously it's always one of the things you look back and you go, I wish I'd done this time or that time. But I think the fact that there was kind of an active effort to address, I think is the key. I think with remote workers, sometimes you fall into sort of a situation where you're not able to be on top of things as easily versus someone who's physically in the office. And so maybe certain things kind of slip through the cracks, or you don't have the opportunity to just catch it as easily. So I think once you recognize it and then taking that active effort to address it, I think that goes a long way. But also, it's great that the person you mentioned, was able to say, "Hey, it's okay. You can go to Laura and have that conversation." I think that is another piece with remote. Sometimes you don't have the rapport, let's say, or the history with someone. So it's great that someone else was able to kind of weigh in and just provide a little assurance that it's okay to have the conversation. It's something that will be a good thing for everybody. So that's really great to see. I want to ask a couple last questions, and then we'll see if there are any questions from the audience. So you've been doing this now for a little bit and working with remote talent. Curious if you had any just, I hate to call them mistakes. It makes it sound like you did something wrong, but just sort of lessons learned along the way. Anything that if you were to do it again, you say, okay, I probably would do this a little bit differently, or I would be a little more mindful of X, Y, Z. Anything like that come to mind?
Nothing really directly comes to mind. Again, I think it just all goes back to making sure that you're communicating and keeping them really involved in the team. And like I said, I think the one thing we did, which now I look back, it might have been a little excessive, but maybe not. Maybe that's why it's working so well, is just the constant communication in the very beginning with the remote employees, just nonstop talking to them, maybe sometimes deterring a little bit of the work because we were taking up so much of their time and communicating. But again, maybe that was actually a positive thing with the way things worked out now over time. So I would say I would change that if I hired another remote employee, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should
Yeah.
keep it the same. But I wish I had more examples for you, but I'm also glad that I don't have a lot of examples for you.
Well, that's why I was hesitant to call them mistakes. I think, especially if for really anyone kind of delving into remote work in the first place, a lot of it is you just don't know what you don't know. So you are trying your best to figure out a process that works best for you. I think there are obviously a lot of best practices and tips and suggestions that will be helpful, but ultimately it probably will be different
Mhm.
for every business, for every company. And so, yeah, mistakes aren't the right word. Lessons learned, I think, is good. And yeah, I think you're right. Maybe something that might have been perceived as not the best ended up working out the way it was supposed to, and that played a part in terms of the success that you've seen. So that's terrific. A final question I want to ask before we flip it over to the audience for Q&A. So, if tomorrow someone was considering remote workers for the first time, someone who, for whatever the reasons, could be cost, speed to hire, whatever the case may be, but they're considering it for the first time, but they're a little nervous about it. What would be your advice to them as they think about approaching and starting down that journey of working with remote employees?
I would say one, talk to your team, talk to your other team members and get their input on it and their feelings about it. Maybe they've had experience with it at other jobs, if they're newer to your company as well. If you do have what were in-house but are now remote employees from, the COVID situation, talk to them and ask them how maybe it could have been better or what steps they could have taken to do differently. And then I would say if you're considering Edge, do the demo, get on the phone, ask all the questions. Cause we did that. I think we did probably maybe 4 or 5, again, might have been excessive phone calls with the Edge management before we even did an interview, just because we were like, okay, we're ready. And then we're like, well, wait, we may not be now. We have this other reservation. So the communication with Edge is also, or whatever company you might go with, is wildly important to have that open dialogue with them as well, because they are experienced, they're interviewing the remote workers, they know what their processes are to find the best hires for you. So just really talk and have those communications with the company that you're looking at going to. And then I know Edge will, because I've talked to agents as well that you guys have referred to me. When you call that, ask for referrals, ask for references, and then call those agents, call those clients that are working with them, and ask them the pros, the cons, the good, the bad. Because I've done that for a handful of other agents that were looking at doing this. And I hope there's other people like me that are willing to share. I imagine that there are, but there's probably tons of examples out there that people could get information. So just really do your homework and keep an open mind about it.
That's great. I think it's really insightful. I think the first and the final point you made about talking to others who have had that experience, it's also one of those things where when you started at Knippenberg with Edge, it was a different time back then. I think remote work was in a different place. I'll just say, fast forward to 2025, there are a lot of companies now who have started to at least try it or have done it. And I think the suggestion on talk to other people, talk to people at your team and see if they have any experience. Because it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people say, oh, yeah, this last company or a couple companies ago, I was in that setup or I did work with folks on a remote basis. And here are some things that I learned and here's what worked well and not so well. I think it's a lot more commonplace now than it once was. And I think it's a lot more accepted now than it once was, depending on the role and kind of what you're looking to do. So that's great. Actually, before I turn into Q&A, any other final thoughts, Laura, before we go to Q&A? Anything else that I didn't ask you about that you'd like to mention or share?
I would say just from my conversations with our current remote employees, and I said consistent communication was across the board with them, trust, respect. Two of the other things that they said that one actually kind of surprised me, collaboration. And I asked them
Mm,
to kind of explain more, and they said that they feel really included because we asked them to collaborate with us. So anytime we have like a new process coming, even as simple as like I'm looking for ideas for social media posts, I ask everybody, I include them in that ask. If we're looking at, a new letter or memo to send out to somebody and I'm just wanting to make sure everybody's on board with the wording, I ask them to do that. I've also given them projects that I wanted to start where I've said, hey, your background says you like technology. So in your spare time, work on this process or this program with our management system. Call them, call their tech support, figure it out. And then they do. They seem to really, just like everybody else, they seem to really love that. So collaboration, I never really thought about that, but they're very excited about the way that we have them collaborate with us on new processes, new things, and new projects. And then the other thing was like thoughtfulness. And I know, I've always done stuff for my in-house people, little things from buying lunch to little gifts to handwritten cards. That's hard to do with remote employees, even harder to do, honestly, with overseas employees. But I have done that and I've managed to make that work. And the one girl mentioned, which made me feel good, last year, I got everybody individualized pens made. Everybody in-house
mm,
got one. I got one for all of the Edge employees. I shipped it to Edge in California. Then they shipped it on to Peru and Pakistan. And I had a handwritten note. They all mentioned that and how much that meant to them and how that really made them feel like part of the team. And then they all mentioned as well about Christmas, holidays, bonuses, things like that, that they're included in all of those things. So those were a couple other points that they really said that tied everything together for them. And then the one thing that kind of made me sad on one aspect and happy on the other, and I just want to share it because I've never heard anything mentioned like this before, but the one girl said that we're treated with respect, not like cheap labor. And that hit home for me because I
mm.
feel like sometimes when I talk to other agents, they do treat it like that. And that's really not going to work. That's where you're going to have the turnover. You're going to be constantly going through. You're going to feel like it's not working for you if you just treat them like an actual outsider. You have to make them feel welcome. And that, like I said, it made me feel sad that she felt like that at some point in her previous, relationships, maybe with the producer or the agency she was working with, and for her to say how she really feels like she's treated with respect with us, that part made me happy, of course. So I just wanted to share that with everybody because I felt like that was a moving point and something really important to be aware of.
That's terrific. Lots of really wonderful insights and suggestions there. I think the point about, whether it's the collaboration, whether it's the thoughtfulness, but just really kind of what we said throughout the call, treating the remote employees no differently, or as much as you can, no differently than your team who are on site, really makes a difference. It really does, and I think it is a win-win all around, right? Aside from just being, decent humans to do that, it also creates greater retention and probably more productivity, more loyalty and commitment to the work that the remote employees are needing to do. So it's such a basic thing that you'd kind of wonder why wouldn't everyone do it, but I don't think that's the case. So it's great to hear that Knippenberg and yourself
And
are
I
able to
think
drive
sometimes
those types of
people,
efforts.
yeah, and I think sometimes people have a hard time coming up with ideas on how to do it. So hopefully some of the stuff I shared helps give everybody some ideas.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think anytime, anyone in sort of a leadership capacity are able to be thoughtful about their team and say, you're not just a cog in the machine. You are on my team, you're human, and I want to treat you with respect and really help you succeed. That's always good. So that's terrific. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Okay, let's switch it over to Q&A now. If you are on the Zoom, there is a Q&A button, so feel free to post questions there. We'll take a look and see if there are any questions specifically for Laura. Happy to pass them over and read them to her to answer, and also just check if there are any other questions that I'm seeing from anyone. So I'll give it a second here. Folks weigh in on it. Okay, so I've got a question while we're kind of getting started. We talked about this a little bit, and you mentioned spreadsheets and things like that. When you think about the remote employees and kind of the culture you're trying to build, were there any specific metrics or signs or data points that you were kind of keeping an eye on to gauge whether things are working well or if they're struggling? Anything like that came to mind as you're thinking about the remote setup?
Yeah, I think everything's similar to what we do for our in-house employees. Like I was saying, the daily activity trackers where they key in, brief information. I know we're asking them to put a note in the system, but then we're also asking them to kind of log their activity for me. So just a brief, like I had this many calls, I did this many payments, I took this many changes, just to make sure that they're answering the phone when it's ringing. They're picking up. So we're using our phone system metrics to watch that. So we know what if they're reporting 15 calls and the phone system shows they had 15, obviously that matches up. If not, then what's going on? Why are we reporting more or less? And then other Excel spreadsheets that we use for special projects that we're doing when we're working and cleaning up our management system. They're checking off each box as they go through it. I'm getting that report back. And again, these are things that we do with all of the employees, and anyone that's helping key information to set up for quotes or key information to reshop people. All of that's going into a database where I see that activity as well. So those are some of the things, just those activity logs, the daily trackers, and then those morning meetings. Because again, if they're not kind of participating in those morning meetings, you can kind of see that something might be going on. So pull them aside, have a conversation, and just kind of get what's up, what's going on, or maybe they forgot to do their activity tracker the day before. It happens. You get busy, the calls just start blowing up first thing, and they might not record their stuff. But then you just kind of talk about how important that is for them to keep track of that activity so that we can share it with each other. And we know their time is being used, purposefully. And if they are struggling with any certain duty, maybe they're shying away from something, if they're not, reporting it, then I can go and see and help them, again, retrain them and get them on board with that. Or, sometimes across the board, we've all had it, I think, in-house or remote employees. Some tasks are just not right for certain people. People,
Mm.
they shy away from a certain phone call, like late pay calls. It's okay. If they can do something else, just pivot and move that to somebody else. Don't continue to struggle and try to get them to do something that they're just naturally not built to do. You can pivot and give them a different task and give that to somebody else who would be better suited for it. And those trackers kind of help you figure that stuff out too.
Yeah, that's really interesting, that last point. Because sometimes I think with any sort of data, there's a story behind the numbers, right? The numbers are what they are, and you can draw different conclusions. And that's really great that you're able to use the tracker to identify, hey, here's some, I don't know, here's a specific set of activities that seemingly either it's not happening or it's taking longer to complete. Well, why is that, right? And then being able to delve into it and kind of come up with the right plan to address it. I think it's a really good way to think about it, so that you're not overreacting or underreacting to the data. You're taking it with the right context and making decisions on accordingly. So, and that's great. Uh, Again, as a reminder, if you have any questions for Laura, feel free to weigh in. I think on either the Zoom or on LinkedIn. We are monitoring both places, so feel free to go there and provide any questions that you might have. Let me see, checking if there's anything. So here's a question. Are there any fun activities you have considered to keep remote talent engaged? Like, talent show, virtual scavenger hunts, virtual escape rooms, anything like that that may have an impact on building trust and culture. So I'll read it again. Any fun activities that have been considered to try to keep remote talent a bit more engaged? Examples provided were a talent show, virtual scavenger hunts, virtual escape rooms. And if so, did that have any impact on building trust and culture?
I will say I'm going to write down some of those ideas because I have not thought of some of those. That's really cool. Thank you for asking that question and providing those examples. What we have started doing, and this was more recently, I just wanted to try to, again, kick it up a level for all the employees in-house and remote. But on our morning meetings, we've started once a week, we'll do a fun activity. So we did what is it, the two truths and a lie. So I gave everybody a heads
Mhm.
up on Monday and said, hey, on Wednesday, we're doing two truths and a lie. We're going to break it down, and everybody participated. That was really fun. Everybody had a blast with that, just cracking up, laughing at each other and what the truth actually was, and the crazy stuff we made up as lies. And then we also did a day where they told us about any pets they have, because as you read, I have 4 dogs. I'm a huge avid pet fan, so I always want to know what pets my employees have. So we did a day where they told us all their pets, all their names, their ages, and then we also did a day where they told us about their siblings, their families, brothers, sisters, whatever they might have. And again, to get to know them better as well, because then we can laugh and talk about that and be like, hey, you said your brother Bob is getting married. How'd that go? That kind of stuff. So those are some of the activities that we've done. And I've looked up some other team building stuff, but I do like those, that virtual talent show. That'd be pretty funny. Thinking back to some of the truths and lies they told, I think that would be a really entertaining platform. But yeah, so those
Yeah.
are the things. And I really honestly just Googled team building activities and kind of took ones that I could do it in a remote environment over the Teams chat in the morning meeting. So those are some of the stuff that we've done so far.
Yeah, when it comes to things like talent shows and just sort of ways to learn more about your coworkers and
Yeah.
colleagues and that type of thing, sometimes it's pretty amazing. I remember not at Edge, but a previous company I worked at, this very reserved person, coworker of mine, really reserved, one day just sort of mentioned, "Oh, by the way, I majored in opera singing in college." Like, what? That's
Uh-huh.
amazing. And sent over a video of her singing opera. It's like, wow, I would have never assumed to guessed this. So you can learn some things about your team through things like talent shows and whatnot.
Absolutely. I
So
like that. Yeah, definitely a good takeaway
yeah.
for me. I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Laura? Check in again the different channels that we've got. Probably have time for one more, maybe two, one more question. Just check and see if any other questions coming in. Let's see. I had one other question I forgot to ask earlier that check before I ask my question. Um, when it comes to the remote setup, the remote teams, and kind of this idea around trust and building trust, uh, I think sometimes I imagine, things might get lost in communication. Like you're trying your best to communicate, stay engaged, and kind of work with your remote folks, but sometimes things kind of get lost, and maybe there's a situation where trust has to be rebuilt. I don't know if this is something that's come up before, but if so, did you ever have to try to rebuild trust? Maybe something got misinterpreted or something just didn't work out the way everyone had hoped, and the situation you had to kind of go back with the remote employees and kind of talk through it and just try to rebuild that trust. Has that come up at all before? And if so, what were some of the learnings
I
that
think in
came out of
minor
that
in minor
discussion?
in, yeah, I think in minor instances it has, and majority of that is when you're sending information via email. Because it's the same thing. Like we don't really text the remote employees, but we send a lot of emails, and a lot of times I don't have time to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, blah blah blah, whatever, do this. I just shoot it in an email. And I have had a few cases where people have come to me and been like, oh, did I do something wrong? Your email came across a little not aggressive, because I'm never that aggressive, but that, like they just thought I was upset or the tone was wrong. So in those cases, I've learned, most importantly, when I am trying to correct something or like re-explain something to somebody, pick up the phone or do a Teams video call so you can see face to face or you can hear voice to voice, because then they can hear the genuineness in your voice and that you're not upset. It's really all about like, hey, you might have misunderstood the direction that I gave you. I'm so sorry about that. Let's, talk it over, and then you can get back on track and I can get back on track. So yeah, in some cases I have had a couple emails when I've been in a hurry or I'm traveling or hopping on a plane where I'm just like, oh, why? And then that's not what I meant necessarily, but my feeling went through my words. So I think in those cases, definitely pick up the phone, do a quick call, or if they ask you a question that you can't quite answer with a smile on your face, tell them, hey, give me an hour and then give me a phone call and we'll talk it out. Don't just hurry up and reply to something. Even if you aren't upset or you don't mean it, sometimes that hastiness comes across as, not quite being pleased.
Yeah, no, it is so hard sometimes to convey properly tone over email or text or Slack or Teams or any sort of written communication. It's just I've always advised folks I work with just assume good intent, right? Assume that whatever you're seeing, there's good intentions behind it, because it is really easy to kind of just read something and go, oh wow, what did I do? How come she's so upset? But that's great that you recognize it and then try to again proactively address it and just make sure everyone's on the same page, aligned on what's actually going on and focusing on the right things. So
Yeah, and I would
it's
say
great.
that's more heavily important in the beginning as well when you're first building that trust. Once you have the trust with them, if you get a little off board, it's okay. You can be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But in the very beginning, you want to definitely I always picked up the phone and would call before I would send the email just to make sure like they knew my mood, they knew like my meaning, and they knew my purpose behind what I was getting ready to send them. So definitely much more important in the beginning, but still always important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much today, Laura, for your time. This has been a great discussion. I know I've learned a lot more about just some of those best practices for working with remote talent, and I really appreciate all the insights you were able to share today. Super helpful, super useful, in my opinion, and hopefully for those who were able to attend the webinar and watch it afterwards, they can learn some things as well. If you do end up pulling off a virtual talent show, I'd love to hear about it. That'd be amazing, and I think it'd be pretty interesting, some of the talents that folks might have. So that'd be great if that ends up happening. But thank you again, Laura. Really appreciate the time, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thanks all. Take care. Bye bye.